Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to today's meeting of the full council. Welcome also to those members of the public and press accessing the meeting via the live stream on YouTube. In order to assure the overall sound quality of both within the room and virtually, may I take this opportunity to remind members and officer colleagues to turn their mobile phones to silent or ensure that they're addressing the meetings using the microphones. Speak directly into the microphone, ensuring that the red light is on. Microphones should then be switched off when there is not in use. We move to agenda item 1. Ask member service to report apologies for absence.
Thank you, Chairman. Apologies received from councillors Mrs Mayor, Councillor Moore, Councillor Mrs French, Councillor Wilkes and Councillor Tangfield. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much for that, Joe. Agenda item 2, the minutes of the council meeting held on the 12th of December 2022 are shown on pages 5 to 10 of the agenda pack. I would like to approve those minutes. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Bowden. Thank you. Are there any comments to make in relationship to those meetings? Please raise your hand. No, so therefore the minutes are approved. Go on to agenda item 3, the chairman's civic engagements carried out both by myself and the vice chairman. They are on pages 11 and 12 of the agenda pack. On to agenda item 4, to receive announcements from the chairman of the council and from the head of paid services. The chairman, I would like to invite members to join me in paying tribute to Fenland District Council's respect to Cyril Bellamy, who sadly passed away on the 17th of December 2022 at the age of 88. Cyril served as a councillor for 31 years, and his family have described him as a dedicated and hard-working with a mantra for always helping others in his community. Cyril first became a councillor in 1978 when he was joined Parsons Drove and Wisbech St Mary Parish Council, where he also served as chairman from 1999 to 2005, and again in 2007 to 2009. In 1999, he joined Fenland District Council as ward councillor for Parsons Drove and Wisbech St Mary. During this time, he served on both licensing and planning committees, as well as being involved in a number of community groups. For instance, Cyril started boxing club in Parsons Drove and was also instrumental in setting up the Village Club 200 club in the village. He helped to purchase and develop the playing field in the village and was also a member of Parsons Drove Football Club and the Community Aids Fair. Although our thoughts and condolences are with Cyril's family and friends and colleagues, and I would like to invite you to join me in a minute's silence, please. Thank you. I would also like to take this opportunity to confirm that the annual general meeting of the Twinning Association will take place in Fenland Hall at 2 p.m. on the 2nd of March. If anyone would like to attend, they're welcome to do so. I've been informed there are no announcements from the Chief Executive, so we'll move on to the next item. Agenda item 5, I would like to invite the Leader of the Council to make his announcement.
Thank you very much indeed, Chairman. Members, you probably think that I must lead a very sad life when I tell you that during the Christmas and New Year period, I was, among other things, reading back old copies of minutes of full council. And I went back to the minutes from February 2015, 8 years ago this week. And I noted that Councillor Clark, who was leader of the council at the time, gave tribute to those members who had given notice at that time that they didn't intend to restand for election and for whom it was going to be their last meeting. And I thought that was a very appropriate thing to have done back then, which is why I'm planning to do the same now for those individuals who've given me permission to do so. I'm not going to list each individual and everything that they did. Between them, they have more than 75 years of service to this council and to their residents between them. And for that, their residents should be very grateful and they should be very proud indeed. The individuals concerned are Councillor Sarah Bligh, Councillor Andy Lynn, Councillor David Mason, Councillor Kay Mayer, Councillor Rob Scolding, Councillor Dave Topgood, and Councillor Fred Hewlett. And to all of those, I give my thanks for the work that they've done over a long period of time, in some cases a very long period of time. If there are any others who have decided that they're not going to stand and I haven't listed them, my apologies, but please do mention those names as well, so that recognition can be given by this council for all the hard work which is done. And I'd like you to join me in thanking all of those individuals for the work that they've done over so many years.
Thank you, Councillor Bowden, and my thanks as the current incumbent of the chairman's position. Thank you, gentlemen and ladies. Agenda item 6 is to receive declaration.
My apologies, Chairman. You were planning to just give an opportunity for some members, if they so wish, to say a few words at this being the final meeting, with your indulgence.
Are there any members whose names have been mentioned that wish to? I see one hand up. Councillor Sarah Bligh.
Thank you. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak. I'm going to try and get through this without getting emotional. Thank you for giving me the heads up on this, so it gave me a chance to come up with a few words. I've enjoyed immensely the 8 years that I've been a district councillor, working with both sides of the floor. I personally want to thank Steve Tierney for getting me into politics, is the right way to put it, and also Gavin Booth for their guidance and knowledge, which has helped me develop my confidence and my ability as a councillor. As Bishop St Mary Parish Clerk, I will still be in touch with the council, so you don't get rid of me that easily. It's been a really tough year for me personally, and I feel that I need to take a break for my health and my family. But I will miss this enormously. My residents deserve 110%, and I'm not going to be able to give that, and so they don't deserve a 50% of me. So I'm stepping down now. But thank you all. It has been brilliant. Thank you.
Councillor Fred Hewlett.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll be very brief. I'd really like to thank all members and officers for all the assistance they've given me over the years here. I wish them every success going forward.
Councillor David Mason.
Thank you, Chairman. And first of all, can I thank the leader for giving me 10 minutes notice of this response. Thank you very much. It has been a privilege to serve the council. I've enjoyed it thoroughly. Having served on the conduct committee initially, been chairman of the staff committee, and currently, as you know, review and scrutiny panel. It has been a privilege, and it's enabled me to be at the heart of things which I enjoy. I should miss you all, but I'm being selfish for once and looking after my family and other activities I have. I will miss you, but thank you for your support throughout the year.
Councillor Scolding.
I'd like to say thank you to everyone here, because across the board, because I classify you all as my friends, as every single one of you. And I'd like to say thank you to the officers, but a special thanks to member services. They are very special, and I'd hope that everyone appreciates them. Thank you.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. There are no more. We'll move on to agenda item 6, is to receive declarations of interest under the local code of conduct and any interest under the code of conduct on planning matters in respect of any item to be discussed at this meeting. Since this is the meeting in which members are being asked to consider and vote on various financial matters, the following reminders are relevant alongside the usual requirements of declaring interest. In relationship to agenda items 12 and 13, which relate to corporate budget and council tax resolutions under section S106 of the Local Government Finance Act 1992, it is an offence for a councillor to vote if they have an outstanding council tax debt of over 2 months. If this applies to you, then you must disclose this, that there is a 106 applies when you get to the stage of the agenda, and you need then to leave the room whilst this item is being considered. Further recommendations are on 7 and 8 of the agenda and items 12 relating to council tax support scheme. In that regard, if a member or their spouse, civil partner, or any person that is living with as a husband and wife is in receipt of local council tax support or related exemption, then a declaration of interest must be made. Following the declaration and assuming that the member remains sufficiently open, they may participate in the debate and cast their vote. Are there any declarations? Please raise your hand. Councillor Topgood, Councillor Cornwall.
Yeah, I'd like to make a section 106 declaration. I will be leaving after item 10, so I've got a mental health team meeting to go to my mental health, and I confirm I will not be present for items 12 and 13.
Councillor Cornwall.
Yeah, Chairman, right, there are 2 things. First of all, for a few weeks only, I'm still a birth holder at Wisbech, Yacht Harbour, so I will not take part in anything in the budget to do with that. And I will also avoid saying anything, getting involved in anything to do with freedom measure where my son works. Okay, so those 2 things. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's duly noted. Are there any others? No. Right, we go on to agenda item 9, public questions. We've received a question in accordance. Jumping a page. I'm jumping a page. We go on to agenda item 7 to receive questions and provide answers to councillors in relationship to matters which, in the opinion of the chairman, accord to the provisions of 8.4 and 8.6. There have been no written questions submitted in accordance with 8.6. I will therefore proceed straight to questions under 8.4. Councillor Cornwall, you have 20 minutes.
I'll do my best to be done within that time, Chairman. Thank you. First of all, may I too pay homage to those councillors who are calling it a day and not entering the election fray this May. May I too thank them for their service and their comradeship over the past years. I wish them well for future years, and more importantly, a well-earned personal free time period, because I think they've earned it. Anyway, I'll move on to my main question. This is probably expected anyway, although more may follow according to each individual item, agenda item, okay, as we proceed on the budget and so on. Okay, so my first question, there's been a bit of a discussion in March about the plans for the regeneration of the town centre, in particular Broad Street, and matters are particularly centred around dissatisfaction with the supposed public consultations around the proposal. Whilst it's apparent that there were some, it's also apparent that they were not always well delivered and undertaken, and they were certainly not very well received. Indeed, when I undertook a recent review, it was apparent that they did not always comply with our very own consultation strategy, leading to what can only be described at the moment as a considerable number of March residents losing confidence in FDC and some of its members and staff. Now, I find that absolutely unacceptable, because people should never be in a position where they lose confidence with their own local authority. So I think there's a failure there somewhere, which I will come to in a few minutes. If we compare the scheme consultations with those undertaken under the planning process, where there were 3 elements requiring planning approval, then we see a far better system of consultation, much more wide-ranging, and in fact, better and a larger number of responses to what is, after all, a well-proven consultation system that we adopt there. There was one hiccup, and that was, for some reason, our IT system managed to kick out some very pertinent submissions by one of the oldest business operating in the town centre. I don't know why, and I hope it's being looked at. So 3 things to try and help go forward. First of all, would you publicly apologise to the people of March for some of the failings they experienced in our processes around the regeneration proposals? That's consultation. Right, could you set in place an arrangement where, prior to each planned public consultation in future, the relevant portfolio holder and CMT member review the proposed process to ensure that what we do actually complies with our own strategy, and the manner in which feedback and comment is recorded and published. And 3, that because one of our planning applications was incomplete, in that the replacement of the demolished Broad Street public toilets was not included, would you publicly guarantee to the people of March that replacement public toilets will be provided, and with some urgency following the demolition of the existing ones? Thank you. Thank you.
Councillor Bowden.
Thank you very much indeed, Chairman, and thank you for your question, Councillor Cornwall. Some of the detail, I have to say, will be better addressed to the portfolio holder rather than to me.
Okay.
So you'll forgive me if I'm not able to answer all of the detail. I wasn't aware that there'd been any IT failings as far as the planning commission was concerned. I'm quite confident that if the member concerned is aware of that, she will now ensure that that is investigated, and that we'll find out what happened and make sure that it doesn't happen again. And clearly, if anything what went wrong, have to apologise. At the end of the day, it is our responsibility to try and get those things right. So far as the public consultations were concerned, there were consultations which took place. I know from some feedback I received personally that not everyone was completely happy with the information which was provided to them, or even the way in which the information was provided to them. It is an unfortunate fact that when you do undertake public consultations, some people will not necessarily be happy with the proposals which are made before in front of them. Nevertheless, I think that there are lessons to be learned. I think it is very important indeed that we do in future plan it more thoroughly, so that where there are any concerns expressed by residents, it allows us to deepen the level of consultation so that we can explore those things further. But ultimately, I'm sorry to say that there will be occasions when consultation takes place and people just aren't happy with the result of that consultation. Consultation doesn't mean necessarily making a change. It means listening and then responding to what we're told. Finally, you mentioned the replacement of the public toilets. I was a little bit surprised myself that the planning application only related to the demolition of the toilets, but I can give a guarantee that a separate and new set of public toilets will be made available, as far as I'm concerned, as close as possible to the location of the existing ones. But I know that the exact location is very much a matter of debate and of consideration. I think it's absolutely essential. At one point, it was suggested there are public toilets available in the library, that should be sufficient. And that was resolutely turned down by members of the cabinet because quite clearly you need something more than that. One thing which is going to be very important about the new public toilets is they need to be located in such a place that they are as visible as they can be, not merely so that people know they're there, but that it makes it less likely that they'll be subject to vandalism. Because the supply of public toilets is not an obligation on this or any other district council. We don't have to do it. And I have to say that if there continues to be a large amount of vandalism of public toilets, the danger is that we will actually end up losing the facilities totally. So planning in, again, it's a case of planning in advance. We don't want them tucked away out of sight and out of mind. We need them to be visible. We also need them to be designed in such a way as to minimize the danger of vandalism.
Councillor Coleman. Your comments about public consultation are relevant because we know that some of it was definitely okay, but there were also problems with one particular aspect of it, and there was a failure to comply with our own policy. I know that. I've carried out the investigation into it. I took part in the consultations. I know how it happened. There was a problem with it, and it must never, ever happen again because it really has caused so many problems in this town of March. It is absolutely incredible. I move on. Now, obviously, things like budget and so on, we'll raise those issues as we go along, obviously. But one general question here now relating to FFL. Looking at some of the figures, especially that around the setup costs of FFL, I see we're, well, they're almost $1/3 and it does seem to be an awful lot of money to spend actually before we get anywhere and before we get any product out of FFL. Is it normal that costs are so high? Because they do seem astronomical, to be perfectly honest with you.
Councillor Bowden.
Well, thank you, Chairman, and again, thank you, Councillor Cornwall, for the question. When building companies start, the costs always are, and development companies start, the costs are always greater at the beginning than income. In fact, there's no income to start off with. There is no real income available at all until you actually get things built and sold. So it's not at all unusual for there to be costs which are incurred before you actually start receiving any income whatsoever. And what we have got at the moment is very much in accordance with what was forecast. Because I think it needs to be emphasized that the overwhelming majority of the costs that you mentioned, and unfortunately you didn't give me notice of the question, so I can't quantify it, but the overwhelming majority of the costs that you questioned were costs which were going to be incurred anyway, because they are costs of Fenland District Council, primarily, but not exclusively, salary costs. So we are talking about the salary cost recharge from Fenland District Council to FFL. Now, unfortunately, you didn't give me notice, so I can't actually give you specific figures right at this moment. But the overwhelming majority of the costs which are currently being incurred by FFL are recharge costs.
Councillor Cornwall.
That's an interesting response, Chairman, because actually most of the printout I've got here, in fact, all of the printout I've got here is in relation to consultants' fees. In fact, I haven't, within the list that I've had printed off for me, there is actually no charges for officer time.
Councillor
It's
Bowden.
all lots of money for consultants.
Yes, you are completely correct. Whenever you have any project like this taking place, you will have consultants brought in to be able to give assistance. But I'm not sure which list you've got, but that list clearly isn't a list of all of the costs for FFL. And if you did have a list of all of the costs for FFL, you would find that the majority are in fact recharges, not merely for staff costs, administrative costs, building costs, a whole host of different overhead costs which have gone in there. But I fully agree, together with those consultant costs, which we would have incurred anyway had the developments taken place under the auspices of FTC rather than FFL.
Councillor Cornwall.
No, I do beg your pardon. I'm not being funny. Right, I've done now until we get to different agenda items. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Members will find the portfolio holders briefing reports on pages 13 to 54 of the agenda pack. Procedure 8.2 permits questions to cabinet members about matters that fall within their portfolio holder responsibilities, and members are reminded that the total time for this agenda item is 1 hour. Who wishes to ask questions of portfolio holders? Councillor Hay.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to ask a question of Councillor Laws. I noticed on page 29 of the report, it mentions the local plan consultation, etc., and that the final local plan will be considered by full council during 23-24. I understand from something else I read recently that Peterborough are withdrawing support for planning, if I'm correct. Will that affect when this local plan will be completed?
Councillor Laws. Councillor Laws, do you wish to remain seated because of your, you may remain seated.
Thank you, that's very kind. Also, it saved time in the council chamber. Thank you, Councillor Hay, for the question. Yes, you're absolutely correct that we are in a position now that Peterborough Council, they've been undergoing an assessment in their own planning department from July last year. We hoped it would come to fruition sooner, but it hasn't. And now we've obviously got the bombshell that they are considering taking certain services away from us. Now, I do say the word considering. Obviously, we are in discussions now. We're hopeful because the particular officer you're talking about is actually the policy officer, but it will also affect other areas of our shared service. Possibly the leader won't like what I'm going to say next, but I still believe that we should bring officers totally back into Fenland District Council, especially in the planning department. But we are where we are. So all I can say is at the moment that negotiations are taking place and I haven't got any firm answers. But I'm happy to keep members obviously informed.
Are there any other questions for portfolio holders? Councillor Sutton.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I will apologise in advance because you'll be aware that I missed the last 2 meetings. So I've got a fair list. Firstly, a question to Councillor Murphy, and back to my old favourite WVI, or VWI as we now know it. Sorry. Yeah, right, brilliant. You know, we've had this question several times, Councillor Murphy, and nobody's ever really explained it properly, but I know you'll be well aware of it now. But the main question is that the deputy leader put out on her social media some time ago that was looking to scrap the brown bin charge because of this BWI. So my basic question is, when is that going to happen?
As long as I'm here, never. We've charged the brown bin again this year. We've got all the direct debits in that we pay every year on time, you know, on the 1st of February. And we're up again this year from last year. And over the 2 years, we're about 2,800 people more paying by direct debit. So everybody likes the program, they like it, and we will carry on with it as long as we can. The other one about the vertical wasting, the government is so fast, I will tell you how quickly it is running now. You actually asked me on the 30th of 6th, 22, and the answer is exactly the same today as it was then. Okay, thank you.
It seems to me you was anticipating a question, Councillor Murphy. It's good to know that, you know, the information given out by your deputy leader was false. But we'll move on from that. We'll move on to the leader now, if I may, Chairman. At the last meeting, Councillor Cornwall asked about the Horizons windfall and several questions about that, and the leader came back and said that it'll be wisely spent, and that's obviously very good news. My question is that, given that East Cambs have had a community fund to make good use of the money, their share of the money, don't you think it'd be wise to get some sort of capital fund raised, for, particularly for the rural areas that get very little, but they represent, I think, 28% of the Fenland population? Because I know of 3 small, and it doesn't have to be a big chunk of money, you know, sort of 10 or 15,000 even would make some of these projects at these small villages and areas in the small village would make all the difference for them to be able to go ahead with the scheme or not. So my question is, would you look at creating some kind of scheme where villages, not necessarily parish councils, but village, because obviously some parish councils cover lots of villages, can feed into that and request some funding? Thank you.
Councillor Bowden.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Councillor Sutton, for that question. It's awfully easy to spend money, isn't it? And it's awfully easy when money is available to say, this is how it should be spent. I would object to the use of the word windfall to describe the monies that we received from Cambridgeshire Horizons. Let's just move backwards 2 or 3 steps to see where the money came from. We were one of the, we, Fenland District Council, were one of the original shareholders in Cambridgeshire Horizons Limited, a company which was set up best part of 20 years ago now, in order to promote economic growth within Cambridgeshire as a whole, particularly housing growth, but not only housing. The company had...
I do know the history of it. I'd just like an answer to the question.
I do appreciate, Councillor Sutton, that you know the history, but there will be many in this room who won't know, let alone the public who are watching. So it's helpful to give some background, because the background also helps to explain the limitations there are, the legal limitations there are as to the expenditure. So the company was set up in order to promote growth in Cambridgeshire as a whole. And the company had some very specific objectives, some legal objectives set out in its memorandum and articles at the time. Now, the company got to a certain stage in managing to utilize the large amounts of capital funding that they got from central government, but they only got so far in that. They spent a large amount of public money. But then in about 2012, that operation largely dried up. And what happened after 2012 was just residual changes which took place with the amounts of money which were still left, which were small amounts of money compared with the original, but still substantial in anyone else's terms. Since there had been no significant movement in that for many years, and there was no prospect of any movement from the company, I made the proposal, and it was accepted last year before last. It was accepted just on 2 years ago, that the company repatriate, for want of a better word, the excess money that it still had available, almost all the excess money it still had available, to its shareholders. But the only legal way of doing that was to repatriate it for the same purposes that the company, Cambridgeshire Horizons Limited, was set up for. So there are limitations as to how the money may be spent. Now, we've been very cautious, as we always are, to be quite honest, as far as finances are concerned. We received some £3.89 million of money from Cambridgeshire Horizons. 1.05 million of that money was to be utilised towards the expenditure on the A14, which I could talk a lot more about if you wish to, but you probably don't want me to. And of the remaining 2.84 million, we've been careful to ensure that that is earmarked for projects to do with economic growth. And that is how it has been used so far. The only amount which is currently actually being used is 149,000 of that, but it operates on an annual basis. So the 31st of March, I believe it is, each year, the Section 151 officer has to write to the company secretary of Cambridgeshire Horizons Limited to say what use has been made of the money that we have from Cambridgeshire Horizons Limited in the previous 12 months and what the justification is for using it based on the legal criteria that under which Cambridgeshire Horizons Limited was set up. And so it is currently projected for 22-23 that another £330,000 worth of expenditure will be so designated by the Section 151 officer. And again, these monies are very much towards economic growth within Fenland. That will leave, assuming that that number actually finishes to be what it is, £2.3 million, which is the number that I mentioned last time to Councillor Cornwall, of money which is available for future years. When it was set up, I proposed, and it was accepted, that this money needs to be spent within 6 years. So there will be just on £2.3 million of this money, which will be available and which will need to be spent over the course of the next 4 financial years. It will be a matter for the new council to decide how they wish to use that money. But I would emphasize that there are legal restraints as to how it could and should be used. And I believe personally that economic growth within the area is of utmost importance. We already have more expenditure on economic growth than we've ever had before in this council. It's the one area of council expenditure which has really grown in real terms over the course of the last 2 and 3 years. And it's something which I personally would advocate we need to do more of, because it affects people's jobs, people's livelihoods, and people's businesses. So I believe that it is very important indeed to prioritise economic growth, but ultimately, we haven't squandered the money over the last 2 years. The majority, the overwhelming majority of the 2.8 million part of the 3.9 million is still available. And it will be for the new council to decide how they spend it.
Well, thank you very much for that long drawn out explanation, and I appreciate, that you probably needed to go through that because obviously other members, now learned something. You still didn't really answer my question as whether you would consider that, because it clearly is legal because East Cams have done it. But I accept what you say because otherwise we'll be here all day. My second question is around the UK Shared Prosperity Fund and how we came to get very town-centric bids. What's happened to the villages? Are they not ever considered in these bids into central government?
Councillor Bowden.
Again, better to ask the portfolio holder than me, but I'm happy to answer. And just to answer the final question, you got a second question in first, or rather the second part of your first question in again. These projects you're talking about should be brought forward. And I'm not sure which projects you're talking about, but they can't be considered from that source or from any other source unless they are actually brought forward. And it's not as though we only have Cambridgeshire Horizons Limited money to use. There are earmarked reserves which can be used. There are in some cases Section 106 monies which can be used. We've got prudential borrowing, we've got CPCA grant monies and other monies, and we've got our own general reserves as well. There are lots of sources of funding for good projects. And you're talking about projects which are relatively small here. So I'm disappointed not to know what these projects are and if they have been brought forward for consideration at all by the council. UK Shared Prosperity Fund. This was a very difficult set of projects to move forwards. First of all, we were not given autonomy in making application towards the UK Shared Prosperity Fund. Government decided that in those areas which have got combined authorities, it would be the combined authority which put forward the bid, and then money would trickle down to the local district councils. So everything we did had to be done through the combined authority. Some part of the UK Shared Prosperity Fund monies ended up being centrally organised by the CPCA, and we just had to buy into what it is that they were putting forward. Other items were a matter of us trying to work out how the criteria which had been published by central government could best be matched by opportunities that we had. We didn't distinguish between towns and villages. We didn't distinguish between the different towns we have in our area. Although it has to be said that more went to Wisbech than other areas because Wisbech qualified better for under the criteria than many of the other areas. But we just went for the best schemes which were available with the funds which we had potentially available using the criteria which central government had laid out. There were occasions when central government, when they're putting forward schemes like this, specifically state that there will be a rurality premium and the more rural areas will get preference. That wasn't the case in this particular scheme. So we went for the schemes which were available, and not surprisingly, when you're talking about things such as education and some other areas, they tend to be located within the towns rather than within the villages. But it was to benefit the whole of Fenland, not just to benefit the towns where the particular schemes may have been. If you want more detail, the portfolio holder is the better person to speak to than me.
And Councillor Bowden, so if I've got some schemes within my ward, a small amount of funding, up to 10 grand, I come to you and you can find me some money. Is that what you're suggesting?
Councillor Bowden.
It wasn't what I was suggesting because there are other methods of doing it, but I'm happy to short circuit the system. And if any member wishes to come to me with schemes, delighted they get onto the list. Whether they'll be chosen or not is another matter entirely. But if you'd prefer to do it that way rather than through the normal committee system or through directly through a portfolio holder, or when an opportunity arises for specific funding, so be it. I'm always here to help, Councillor Sutton, as you know.
Thank you for that. The last one, I mean, I was going to comment on the LATCO setup fees, because I feel that the setup fee is wrong. They should be split up on the website, because some of them are not setup fees in my view. So there seems to be what making the figure really high. Should be a LATCO setup fee, which is what it is set up, and then there should be a LATCO planning fee or whatever. But it all comes under that heading, which I think is wrong. But anyway, we'll leave that. Our old friend Purdah. It'll come as no surprise to some members here that once again, this council has gone belt and braces twice, and then a bit of behind the string around the trousers to make sure they don't fall down. I've mentioned this time and time and time again. And I have had email discussion with yourself. I find it ridiculous that we're told with the Golden Age Fair, but we can't have a Golden Age Fair within Purdah. I've argued against that in previous years on many, many occasions, and I'll argue again now. And we was told at a meeting just a few weeks ago that no, can't do anything in Purdah because this and this. I mean, it's a nonsense, because 2 or 3 days later, we get an email through with a note to say the March St George's Fair is going ahead on April the 28th. How on earth can anyone justify that we can't have a Golden Age Fair, but they can promote and do all this? Councillor Bowden, it's a nonsense, and I hope you will agree with me.
Councillor Bowden.
Thank you, Chairman. And Chairman, you may be surprised to hear that I've got quite a lot of sympathy for the comments which have just been made by Councillor Sutton. He and I are probably closer on this than many others may be. There are a few things which need to be corrected, however. First of all, there is a clear distinction between what happens with what has been in the past St George's Fair. It's going to be the St George's Festival this year for various reasons, and what happens with Golden Age events. And the Golden Age fairs are quite clearly promoted by FDC, and they are FDC events. Whereas with the St George's annual event, whilst it's jointly organised by FDC and March Events Committee, with various other partners, including March Library, March Community Centre, 2020 Productions, CPP Marketplace. And whilst we design the promotional materials, the banners and the posters, etc., it doesn't include any reference to FDC. So they're not FDC branded events, whereas the Golden Age fairs are. But I'm led to believe that that's not the reason why there is no Golden Age fair taking place during the Purdah period. It's that in order to celebrate the 20th anniversary year of the Golden Age fairs, that in order to make sure there's enough time to organise that event properly, which I understand is going to be in June, that it was decided not to hold one this year. So I've been told. Now, having said all of that, which doesn't quite tie in with your question, I agree with you that the rules to do with Purdah are over bureaucratic and they are sometimes ridiculous. But they are there to protect the interests of those who are not in power, who are not in an administration. And the reason Purdah exists is because it can be the case that those who are in an administration can manage to manipulate publicity, they can manage to manipulate consultations, they can manage to manipulate events just before an election to try and benefit themselves politically. And that's the reason, first of all, Purdah exists. And secondly, it's the reason why it's not up to the leader of the council, whether it's Purdah or not, it's left to the officers to decide what's Purdah, because they are independent and they will not be able to be accused of making a decision where, if I made a decision about Purdah, I could be accused of doing so for partisan purposes. Now, I've actually experienced what happens when you do have this so-called administrative resource, when the administration, when the people in power actually have the opportunity to change things like this and to manipulate the whole of the atmosphere before an election by making announcements just at the right time, by giving people all sorts of promises of things to come. And I've seen that because the last time there were gubernatorial elections in Russia, I was an election observer in the Belgorod Oblast. And in some ways, it was an extremely democratic process, more democratic even than ours in some ways. But so far as the atmosphere is concerned, everything was pumped out, even at the local factories, to ensure that the ruling administration would be portrayed in a good light and that people would vote for that ruling administration. When it came to the vote, the election and the vote was actually very fair. And the count of the vote, which took place at each polling station, was scrupulously fair. It was more open than we'd have. The only problem was when those numbers were then transferred to the central counting system, they were all changed so that the administration won. But nevertheless, the point is that the administration manipulated the political environment to its own advantage. Purdah rules stopped that from happening, and having the rules administered by our independent officers rather than by members is therefore a very good thing.
Thanks for that, Councillor Bowden, and I'm sure that other members of the Golden Age team would disagree with the reasons given, because that was not what we were told. But anyway, we'll move on. Next question to Councillor Laws. Nice to see you back in action, Councillor Laws. We have missed you, and I hope your jaw is all right. Good. I did ask a question of Councillor Bowden 2 or 3 meetings ago about the creation of the IDB portfolio for delivery and strategy, and Councillor Bowden came up with what I felt was a rather bizarre idea that people shouldn't save up for what they want. But I just wonder what your take is on your role as the IDB delivery person. What do you do, and what are the outcomes, and what do you see as that role?
Councillor Laws.
Chair, how long have you got? Okay, I just said, how long have you got? Yeah, well, we're running out of time. It is a complex answer, and in fairness, I want to give it the credence it deserves, because I do have several thoughts on the IDBs and where this could move forward and what has been done, and the role obviously as a representative as well. So I'm more than happy to take this away rather than actually give a long speech now. And I will contact you tomorrow.
That's fine, Councillor Laws, but can you stay with protocol and then you copy into me and answer to every other member as well, please?
Absolutely, not a problem.
So,
Thank you.
moving on to something similar to the issue raised by Councillor Hay with the local plan. It must be 2 years ago, I asked if the local plan could be put on the website as a top task, being how very important it is to the district and the people. It's still difficult to find. You have to do a search, and that still hasn't got there. You did say that you would do it, and it hasn't been done. So that's one question. The other thing is with central government now not dictating to us our numbers, what effect is that going to have on the local plan going forward? Because we now have to obviously have housing needs assessment for evidence to go to inspection. So as that process started, where are we in there? And you know, because we have to do it, I would assume, because otherwise we've got no evidence of numbers needed. So what effect is that having? Or going to have?
Councillor Laws.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, it is bound to have an effect. Obviously, we were not prepared for that. We didn't expect it. Yes, we're in the process now. I've got a meeting in a couple of weeks' time. It will be taken into account. It's got to be taken into account. So in answer to your question, yes. And moving forward, obviously, we will have to look at the reports that we've got, the housing assessment need, and then obviously move forward again with the local plan. So, you know, unfortunately, we can't anticipate these things, and it's going to delay the process yet again. But unfortunately, it's something that we've got to obviously address. So in answer to your question there, I'm surprised you've said about the local plan not being on the system, because
No, it's on the system, Councillor, but I did ask if it could be pinned to the top tasks.
oh,
And you
right.
agreed.
And that hasn't been done.
That hasn't been done.
Right. Thank you.
I think
for
it's
pointing
important
that
that it is, because particularly going forward, we're getting closer to the
Yeah.
decision being made, and people want to have easy access.
Absolutely. No, I'll address that.
The other thing, the final question, which I'm sure you'll be pleased about, most members will be, is again, very early on in this administration, I asked about level 2 flood risk assessments, which we have in Wisbech, so we can build in flood zone 3. And we came out on this plan with a crazy type of situation, whereby we can build in Wisbech on the flood zone 3, but we can't in Benwick, for example. I read with dismay, really, the documentation now, which is putting forward these various sites, and the reasoning for some of the sites not being put forward, and when they're ideal places other than they're in a flood risk 3, are being rejected because of flood risk 3. But if you're going to do this across the board, then which you know you agreed to, and so did Councillor Bowden in terms of the finance of it. The way we're going back to where we are now, where we're going to still be able to build in Wisbech, but we can't in Benwick. You know, Benwick in particular has got no development whatsoever. All their sites that they put forward have been rejected because of flood risk. Well, there isn't any other land in Benwick, so how has that come about? You know, it really seriously does need looking at, the Council of Laws, because it is just bonkers. You know, nobody understands it. We on the planning committee, you know, we almost on a monthly basis, 4 weekly basis, are scratching our heads as to why, you know, probably one part of the agenda we agree something in Wisbech in flood zone 3, but then on another part of the agenda we're saying no, we can't do it because it's in flood zone 3. It's bonkers.
Councillor Laws.
Thank you, Councillor Sutton, for your question. I understand what you're actually saying is consistency, basically.
Yeah.
And as you are aware, we called first call for sites, and we called them for a second. Because we couldn't go out to public consultation because of the COVID problem or pandemic. All of these sites, if you look at them, have actually been assessed correctly. They've got consistency there. Well, I know you're going to disagree with me, it's obvious. But, you know, what I will do, again, I will take this away, I will re-examine it. I mean, I know certainly the Whittlesey sites inside out and how the officers have carried out the assessment. I would support their findings. But I will take it away. I'll revisit this and see what I can come back with. Okay.
Thank you very much for that. One typical example, Councillor Lords, is Colletts Bridge. They've agreed a parcel of land in Colletts Bridge, which is possibly one of the most unsustainable places in the district, but it's in flood zone 1. Yeah. Do I need to say anything more? You know, we've had planning inspectors, you know, holding decisions we've made in Colletts Bridge Road saying it's unsustainable, yet all of a sudden 10 houses are, you know, it's not consistent at all. It needs, and I would like you to reconfirm with the finance board that we are going to do a level 2 flood risk assessment across the patch so that we're on a level playing field. Otherwise, we're just going to go back to where we are now and everybody's making food. And I know Councillor Benny is in agreement with me because we've spoken about it many times, and other planning committee members as well. So I would like your commitment now to say, yes, we agreed 3 years ago and we still think we should do that.
Councillor Laws.
Thank you. As ever, the commitment will be now to review it, because obviously I need to go back and look at the assessments and the reports, which I will do thoroughly. So you haven't got 100% guarantee. What I am going to say, I will go back now on the reports, I'll look at the officers' assessments, etc., and go from there.
I'm back on the commitment you made 3 years ago.
No, I'm not going back on it. I need to revisit the paperwork because obviously the assessments and reports, some of them have been done. So I want to revisit that. Thank you.
Chairman, sorry to have taken up so much time, but you
Thank you very much for that. Councillor Booth, you eventually got there.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll continue with the line of question Councillor Sutton started there. So just on that point about the flood zones, so you know, representing a rural area and a couple of parish councils, I think the issue is that basically the officers looking at if it's flood zone 2 or flood zone 3, and therefore they're discounting these sites that often parish councils or local residents are putting forward and supporting because it's simply in those areas. And I think the point that Councillor Sutton's making is that, you know, with mitigation measures, you should be able to develop in those areas. And what we need in our local plan is a policy where you can have these sites there, but they have to also include the flood mitigation measures so that the development can take place. And I think that's what is missing from the local plan. Because, you know, I know of other sites and we have it when we have the sequential flood assessment and, you know, they can prove there's no other suitable sites, but they can therefore develop, but they have to put flood mitigation measures in. And that is the type of policy we need to include in the new local plan so that we can develop these sites in other rural areas to make those. Sometimes it's improving the sustainability of those rural areas because you're going to have more housing in areas where it will then support the local services. So I think that is what we need to look at. So I don't know if you should comment on that.
Councillor Laws.
Thank you, Chair. I don't disagree with what you're saying, Councillor Booth. And obviously, as I said, now with the changing government regarding housing, we are going to look at several things. So again, taken away from this meeting.
Councillor Booth.
Thank you. I'll ask the next question of Councillor Laws as well. So apologies, I haven't sort of given you pre-warning of this one, but it's coming up because of the question that Councillor Hay asked earlier about the sort of state of the planning department and that. And at recent ONS meeting that unfortunately you weren't available for, I asked a question about, you know, what's happening with planning, because obviously if you look at, was it page 46 of the report, only 62% of the minor applications are being dealt with in the 70% deadline or target, which is set by the government. Now, I had assurances from the leader, because discussions around planning, that we're getting better. Well, if we're getting better and the target or the figure actually is in 62%, where have we been in the past? And how are we going to get out of this sort of mess we're in? It's a common complaint I'm getting from residents and developers, because basically they can't get responses because I think the planning department's under-resourced at this moment in time, and they're just coming up against a brick wall whenever they're trying to resolve issues.
Councillor Laws.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I mean, I don't think this will come as any surprise or shock to the members in this room. Planning is an important department, and we've undergone some retirements, some leaving. Again, I could go on for many hours about this, but principally, there was a 10-year period where to qualify for town and planning qualifications and degrees, it wasn't sexy at the time. People were not actually signing into those educational areas. So now we've reached a point where people are retiring. Some have gone in the private sector, taken early retirement and gone in the private sector. Therefore, we then have this gap where we have quite a market full of junior planners, but we've lost, unfortunately, the senior planners, and that's where we're adrift at the moment. Obviously, we have tried to fill this gap by using agency staff. Now, that isn't a course I'd like to do, having experienced agency work or agency workers in my previous role in management, but we had no option. Some of those agency staff have come really good for us, but there's quite a few that haven't. And how you recruit agency staff now, you can't actually apply for references or actually investigate their previous roles in other councils. And therefore, you know, this opens up a problem. So we actually have the staff, and then it takes us a little while to get them into Fenlands training. They may not be up to our standard, and then we have to part company. But we now are in a position where we're using another company that do all these checks and management checks, and they actually control their staff. So it's more of a direct contact. So in answer to your question, yes, there will be improvements, but it's taken a couple of months to sort of put these things in place. We've lost some good members of staff for good reasons. One in particular we gave thanks to was Alison Hoffman, who after 30 years has decided to retire. So, you know, there's been bona fide reasons as well. We are also expanding the fact that we want a full-time tree officer. And obviously we need to replace the conservation area officer or conservation officer. We have an arrangement with East Cambs at the moment that we're dipping into their resources to fulfill that part. But I'm hopeful that we have recruited that area now. And obviously it leaves us wide open with the senior planners. So in answer to your question, it's been a catalogue of events. We are advertising, we're doing everything possible. We are not the only council that are missing good planning officers. We are not, I can assure you. And it wouldn't actually matter if you offered all the money in the world. Those people with qualifications are just not out there. So, as I say, we're doing everything to strive, and I've got to say, it's our thanks to our present staff members in the planning department that are actually obviously having heavy workloads. They are under stress, but they are doing the best they very can. Councillor Connor and myself have also volunteered our services for certain things as well, because there are probably certain queries, certainly from our members here, we've asked them to direct any queries they have to us. So we're trying our best as well to support the system. Thank you.
Can I bring another? Councillor Connor.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. And yeah, and obviously the planning comes up, the planning applications have been far, far greater this year than they have in past years. So with that, with coinciding with other officers leaving and agency staff being brought in, that coincides with the 62%. But all the other, the majors, and they're well past the normal. We have got to, as Councillor Law said, we are improving. on that.
Councillor Connor,
Sorry.
this is questions.
I'm just trying to explain to.
I realise
reason.
you're trying to explain which Councillor Laws has already explained, but this is a question time to portfolio holders.
I was just trying to reiterate, before I go, just trying to reiterate to Councillor Booth, one of the problems that, Councillor Laws had.
Okay. Mr. Booth, you wish to continue?
Yep, Mr. Chairman. Sorry, Councillor Booth.
It's okay, thank you, Councillor Connor. Chairman, I did have a question for Councillor French, but unfortunately he's not here. So if I could have a written response. But on page 29, we talk about the capital projects for the street lighting. And we did have in there updates on the parish council updates that were taking place, because there are a number of schemes. But that appears to have been taken out of the report for some reason. I suspect it's because it doesn't paint a very good picture at the moment, because we're not able to get the updates, which is a question I put to Councillor French probably 2 meetings ago, around the parish street lighting, in particular in Parsons Grove. We asked, must have been over 2 years ago, to start replacing our street lighting, and we still can't get a solid answer on where they are with it. We know bits have been done, but which bits, it's not clear. Clearly, there is something not working correctly with our supplier cable testing and getting that information through to the parish councils. So I'm disappointed we haven't had that update in this report. And can we get a written update? We have actually emailed Councillor French directly, and we're still waiting for a response to that from her and officers. So yeah, we need to get an update on what's happening with street lighting. It's not working for parishes at the moment, and there is quite a big issue.
Councillor Bowden.
Thank you, Chairman. In Councillor French's absence, I'll agree that we will provide the information as soon as we possibly can.
Thank you, Councillor Bowden.
Last question, Councillor Hoy. I'm going to repeat myself again here. Page 16, empty households, bringing empty households back into use. I've had assurances from you, probably from the last year, that you'd be telling us what the net position is. Still, we don't have that information in this report. It can't be that difficult. Can we have the data in there to tell us, what's the net position? Are we improving the situation or not with regards to bringing empty housing? And it's not just in this meeting, it's an overview and scrutiny that I keep asking this question.
Councillor Hoy.
Yeah, because I don't think part of the problem is you're not really exactly clear what you want, because obviously it tells you how many empty homes we brought back into use, but empty homes in comparison to what? Total homes in the whole district, total homes in the town, total homes. It's people need to be clear exactly what data you want.
Chairman.
Councillor Booth.
That's not correct, Councillor Hoy. It's been quite clear from discussions, and you've agreed, it's around how many empty homes we are bringing back into use. Is it a net positive or is it a negative figure? So how many total empty houses are there? We have that information. We know how many we're bringing back into use. So we must know how many are still there. And that's from the council tax data. You've said it, you could provide that information for last year. You're now saying that we're not being clear enough on what the data is we want. I think that's quite clear.
Councillor Hoy.
Yeah, so obviously I can't remember every single conversation we've had over the last year. I remember we've had a talk about social housing and empty properties for social housing. Obviously, we've had discussions about the empty houses in Thorney. There's been various discussions around this. You're right, there is data available, but the council tax data itself isn't going to be 100% accurate, because you don't know every single property there is going to be out there. But obviously, we can see from the report, it is a positive. Every empty home you bring back into use is a positive. And obviously, we are bringing more and more back in every year as the numbers are increasing. But in terms of, so if what you want is an overall figure and what percentage of the figure is now brought back every year, I'm sure we can add that.
Does that conclude your questions, Councillor Booth? Thank you. Are there any more questions? If not, we'll move on to agenda item 9. We received a question in accordance with paragraph 9A of the standing orders, which appears on page 55 and 56 of the agenda pack. Mr. Melton attends the meeting in his capacity as parish councillor for Mainey Parish Council. Mr. Melton, welcome. Can I please invite you to the lectern to ask your question? The total time for this is 3 minutes.
Well, thank you, Chairman. I'm not here in my role as a parish clerk. I'm here as a concerned council taxpayer who lives in Chatteris. I'm just pleased and thank you very much for inviting me and allowing me to come back today. It is nice to see so many friends. It's nice to see Dan, the housing man, still here sitting at the back there. And Mark Saunders and Mike Cornwall will be pleased to know that I've got my posh tie on because my priorities have changed over the last 8 years. The reason for my question, Chairman, is that once I retired from local government and retired from business, and after I'd worn the dog out, I decided to get another job. And the job I chosen was to be a clerk. I jumped ship and I turned into a local government officer. This has got a nice ring about it. However, working with Mainey is actually one of the best jobs in a 54-year working career that I've ever had. From that experience of being a clerk, I've been invited by a number of parishes and with my CV in local government to do work in other parishes. And I've done work in South Cambridgeshire, East Cambridgeshire and Huntingdonshire. And what concerns me is the level of Section 106 that they receive for local communities that we don't in Fenland. So my question will be, when I'm finished to Councillor Laws, is why on earth in Fenland we don't get this, and what are you going to do about it in the future? Working in East Cambridgeshire, I hadn't been there a very few weeks, and suddenly I get a letter from the financial officer, Mr. Ian Smith, to tell me that they credited £60,000 to our bank account for development. Another £3,000 for a one-off house in Wilburton Road. During this financial year, I received a list of all the monies that are paid for all the parishes in East Cambridgeshire that have been procured through Section 106. Now, the only one that's missing on there is Sutton, because the clerk at a recent SLC meeting I went to, Society of Council Clerks, actually said, we've had so much money given to us, we've invested it in property. Those of you who drive to Sutton will see there's another field. And she was saying, we don't know what we're going to do with the Section 106 monies when it comes in. In South Cambridgeshire, I get letters from a very nice young man called Jamie, who says to me, Alan, hi Alan, pleased to tell you that we're going to remit to you some further 106 monies. And so far in this financial year, I've had £109,000 with another 60,000 to follow. In Huntingdonshire, I did some local work in Fenstanton as the responsible finance officer. And I was surprised to find that there were Section 106 accounts with over £300,000 in them, which were going to be allocated for local projects. Now, it concerns me that Fenland District Council haven't got a significant policy on this. And I'll give you some examples. Just let me take you about the Wenny Meadow. Now, I know it's not been decided yet, but one of the reasons I objected to that is because 97 houses, there's plenty of provision for drainage, school and everything else, but nothing for the local community. 270 houses being built in Donington Road, Chatteris. All the Section 106 monies, but nothing for the local community. Let me tell you something. The developers are lifting your leg using the legislation set out on the viability standards. Circa,
Councillor, sorry, Mr. Melton, your 3 minutes is up.
One more comment, Chairman, if you don't mind.
And then
on Wenny Meadow, I use that as the example because it's the easy one. Is that in the document, and I've read all the planning application, it actually says in there that their proposed selling of those houses is circa £250,000. exactly the same houses on the same layout within 200 yards are selling at £450, £450,000 plus. You have having your legs lifted. You need to look at this policy and challenge these viability standards and criteria in your next council, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Melton. Councillor Laws, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to start off by making one comment. I thought it was Wenny Road, not Weddy Meadow. We haven't got to that stage. If I may respond to you, Mr. Melton, East Cambridgeshire District Council and Huntingdonshire District Council both operate a community infrastructure levy scheme, as we all know as SIL. Under the government rules for SIL, the council must give a cash proportion of the SIL income to parish councils, where the SIL paying development is located in that parish. Fenland District Council, having looked at the development viability twice now, have decided that it is not appropriate to introduce SIL due to the property low values in the area. This is why Fenland Town and parish councils do not receive monies from the District Council as a matter of course. South Cambridgeshire District Council do not operate a SIL system, and so the parishes do not receive any SIL monies. Where there is a Section 106 for a development, it can sometimes be the case that the developer provides money to be spent on the provision of new and improved community facilities. As an example, play parks, in such cases, Snowley Park in Whittlesea. In such cases, it is usual that money is held by the District Council. This money will be used by the council itself, but it can potentially also be made available to the town and parish councils to spend on qualifying projects. The refurbishment of a play park, as an example. Town and parish council have in the past periodically been emailed so that they are aware of the Section 106 position in their area. And I shall arrange that they are so informed again later this month. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Laws. Mr. Melton, do you have a further minute in which to?
Yes, Chairman,
supplement?
I'll correct that, Chairman. In East Cambs, they operate both 106 and SIL, and in Huntingdonshire too, because there is a differential like there is in Finland of values. Could I just say this? You, Chairman, the leader of the council, and Councillor Laws are all Whittlesea members. You know the amount of housing that's been built there recently. I think it's well over 1,000 houses, or what's in the pipeline. You managed because of the tax base to keep reducing your council tax, fine. But if a proper Section 106 policy was in place, you wouldn't be, as a Whittlesea Town Council, wouldn't be borrowing money. It wouldn't be missing out on match funding. They would be in the same position as Sutton and have money to invest in the local community in Whittlesea Town. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Laws, you have a further 3 minutes in which to reply, if you wish.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to question where Whittlesea is borrowing money from and why are we borrowing it?
Thank you, Mr. Melton, for your questions, and Councillor Laws for your responses. Now concludes today's public questions. You are welcome to stay for the duration of the meeting or to leave in the appropriate manner.
I'm going to leave, Chairman, because I'm very, very important meeting.
Thank you very much. That's up to him.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. We now move on to agenda item 10, a motion submitted by Councillor Tierney with regards to the repairs to the fire damaged building in Wisbech. Agenda item 10 is a motion of notice from Councillor Tierney, which appears on pages 57 and 58 of the agenda pack. Councillor Tierney, would you like to move your motion?
Yes,
You have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll be very brief, and hopefully this is a non-controversial one. So those of you will know, we have a building in the marketplace that caught fire last year and burnt down. It was pretty much completely destroyed, and some of the adjacent buildings were also damaged. Nobody was hurt, luckily, but our sympathies go out with the property owners and business owners who were affected. But the problem is that it's now been nearly a year and it's still burnt out. It's now surrounded by scaffolding to make it safe. It's blocking one of the entrances to town. It's an eyesore. And a lot of local people are saying, when is this going to be resolved? Now, I'm completely aware that, hopefully you've read the motion, so I'm not just reading the motion out, but hopefully I'm aware that officers have been working with the owners and meetings have been had. And I know there are difficulties that insurance has to be claimed and the owners have to negotiate the fact that it's a listed building in a conservation area. So these are all difficulties. But nonetheless, it's not always clear to people that these things are going on behind the scene. We all know, but it's not always clear to local people. And one way to highlight that work is being done and to focus attention on it is to raise a motion. So the reason I brought this motion today is not that I think work isn't being done, but that I want to assure people that we do support the work that is going on and that we understand the importance of getting this resolved for Wisbech going forwards. And so I move my motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Tin. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Booth. Do you wish, Councillor Booth, do you wish to speak now or at the end of the debate? Thank you. The item is now open for discussion. Would any member like to make a presentation? No. No. Councillor Booth, do you wish to?
Yeah, no, I support this motion. It does seem a bit of a weird motion to bring forward because effectively it's telling the officers to do their job. But yeah, I fully support it. I mean, I recall when I think it was a Belfast building burnt down, and I think it was Councillor Buckner went over to Kings Lynn West Norfolk Council and found out all the statutory powers, which I think Councillor Tierney is making reference to in this. So yeah, let's get on and get this job done, and yeah, make Wisbech Marketplace and town a better place. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Booth. Councillor Tierney, would you like to sum up?
Yes, only to say it's not that I don't think officers are doing the job or will do the job, but what's going on behind the scenes is not always visible to people. And I think a motion like this highlights that we understand the importance. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Chair. We now move to the vote. All those in favour, please show. That's a unanimous vote in favour. Thank you very much. We now move to agenda item 11, the business plan for the year 2023-2024 can be found on pages 59 to 78 of the agenda pack. I call upon Councillor Bowden as leader and portfolio holder for finance to propose the report.
Thank you, Chairman. Every year we produce the formal document, which is the business plan, which identifies the challenges and opportunities that we have ahead of us in the next year. And by its very nature, each year's plan builds on what we had in the previous year. I have to say that as far as the plan is concerned, yet again, it is more streamlined and more readable than last year. And again, that is thanks to the work which has been put in both by officers and by Councillor Tierney. Coming out of COVID, we are able once again to operate more in a business as usual basis. But what we do have in this year's report, which is new, is a Council for the Future section. And this highlights some of the bigger changes which are taking place and will be taking place and will have to take place in this council. We particularly are highlighting the Transformation 1 agenda, which involves the process mapping of the work that we do and the reorganizing of the services that we have. And we are making preparation for the Transformation 2 agenda, which changes the physical and virtual footprint of this council. The report as a whole went to overview and scrutiny panel last month. Various suggestions were made by the ONS panel, which have been incorporated within this report, and I endorse it to the council. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, in spite of previous comments about the consultation, I suppose I'm a little surprised that 29 people responded positively of, what are we, 102,500 our population now. So it's an awful response, isn't it? But more worrying probably is that no business responded, according to the words here. Now, I don't know why. I mean, is it because there's very little in the plan to do with business and economic development, despite what the leader said earlier? Because I didn't actually think there was much in there anyway on those elements. So I think that's a hole somewhere that needs looking at. Looking at the feedback, wasn't entirely good, but there's some very pertinent questions or answers in there, you know. Some people did seem to think quite carefully before they responded, but I can't actually see where some of those have been reflected in the final version. Because coming back to our dear consultation strategy again, it says, only consult if you're willing to make changes based on responses. But I don't see any changes because of those responses. Right, so maybe somebody could explain that to me. I may be simple, but you know, let's stick to what strategies and things we've got.
Councillor Bowden.
Thank you, Jim. Right, well, I can answer the first question that Councillor Cornwell asked very easily indeed. Why so few responses? It's because of two factors. The first is that people are utterly fed up with consultations being thrown at them left, right and centre by all layers of government. And the second is people don't believe that the consultations actually matter at all because the things that they say aren't even read. Now that is the reason that you end up with such small numbers of individuals responding to consultations. Now it is possible as local members, and I've certainly done this as far as the combined authority is concerned for both of the last 2 years' budgets, it's possible as a local member that you can manage to get much more interest in your local area out of something which is relevant, but that's down to members as much as anything else to encourage individuals to read what has been said and to respond where there is something which is particularly important to a locality. And was definitely everything that was responded, all responses that were made were read. We also gave careful consideration to the comments which were made at overview and scrutiny, and changes were made as a result. But not everything which is said in a consultation necessarily does result in a change. Nevertheless, it does inform us, and it does inform us not merely about what is in this particular document, but also how it will develop in future years as well. So I have to say that just because an item is responded to and a comment is made doesn't necessarily mean that it will come into the report. Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Councillor Booth.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, so just following up on what Councillor Cornwell said, I think one of the biggest comments that seemed to come out of the consultation was it's not enough in plain enough English. Now, yeah, I think there have been improvements on previous versions, but it's probably more the presentation style as opposed to the content. And I think one of the issues that I highlighted overview and scrutiny is where we've got section about priorities. We say we've got 3 priorities, then on the next paragraph we say our 4th priority is such, and then at the end it says we've got a 5th priority, but there's no actual measures in place on delivery of that, which is the council for the future. So it's no wonder that people are looking at this and thinking, yeah, what's it actually mean? The other big issue, I think, is that they do feel that whatever they say is not going to be listened to anyway, which I think we recognise is an issue. And I think particularly in the rural area, it's around what the district council is delivering for rural residents. And I've made this comment at numerous previous meetings that this document just pays almost lip service to what's happening in rural areas, and all the projects, the major projects, all town centric. There's nothing about helping our rural areas that are in isolation and got poor services. So that's my 2 pence.
Thank you for that. You wish to respond to that, Councillor Bowden?
Other than saying, Chairman, that the whole ethos of growth within Fenland is that it needs to be as widespread as possible. There are opportunities within the rural areas which don't exist within the towns. And we need to make sure that every opportunity which exists to promote economic growth is put forward. Now, we have put more resources into the economic growth section this year than previously, and we'll put more resources in next year than this year. And we are very aware indeed that there are any number of opportunities, especially for small and micro businesses within our rural areas, where assistance can be given, which can ensure that those businesses start, grow and thrive. And I can assure Councillor Booth, Chairman, that where there are larger businesses within the rural areas, they get as much attention as the larger businesses do within the towns.
Are there any more questions? No, thank you very much for that. Councillor Tierney, do you wish to sum up?
Thank you, Chairman. I only wanted to make one comment, actually. I'll leave it to the proposer to sum up. But a couple of people have raised the idea that our consultations are perhaps hard to understand, or there are issues with their communication there. And I guess I have to apologise, because I suppose that really should be my role. Officers will tell you that I've focused on things like the business plan and the portfolio holder reports and the website to try and make them all more user-friendly and clearer. But I haven't really looked at, never thought to look at consultations, I'll be honest. So going forwards, I will be asking officers if I can examine consultations to make sure that the same work is done there and they are clear and easy to understand. Thank you.
Councillor Bowden, do you wish to sum up?
Thank you, Chairman. Before I do so, may I ask your permission for an item to be amended in the recommendations? And that is on the second page of recommendations. Recommendation Roman 10 makes reference to section 15, and it should be section 16. And with your permission, could the motion be so amended?
Yes, the motion will also be amended.
Thank you very much indeed. We've been here for 1 hour, 25 minutes already, and now we start the budget debate. So you'll be delighted to hear, intend to go through item by item and section by section to explain it. And in fact, what I want to do is to give as much time as possible for questions to be asked. But I will go back to July 2019, the first, sorry to go back so far, Councillor Cornwall, but the first meeting that we had in this full council after the last set of elections. And in that, there were 2 things which I put forward. The first was to change the medium-term financial strategy, so that it worked on the assumption that there was going to be a 0 council tax increase in each year, rather than assuming that we would have the maximum council tax increase each year. And the second thing that I established was a budget equalisation reserve. And that was because I had said that it was clear from history that we had a systemic issue with over budgeting. That is, whatever we were budgeting for at the beginning of the year, when we got to the end of the year, our financial position was substantially better than it was when the budget was actually set. And the idea behind doing those two things was, first of all, to ensure that our pencil was sharpened so far as all the estimates we made, all the plans we made were concerned. And the second was to establish a fund from which we could manage to ensure that council tax increases would be smoothed. And my idea was that the budget equalization reserve would be able to be used in those years when we weren't able to achieve a budget without a deficit, so that it was possible to continue to have a zero council tax increase. It had actually been my expectation 4 years ago, although I didn't say it, that in year 3, that is last year, the situation would be such that we would actually be able to propose a council tax reduction, because it was my opinion that with the amount of work which was put in and with the established position that we were already in, which was a very strong financial position, it has to be said, in terms of this council compared with many other local authorities, even compared with many other district councils, it was my expectation that by the time we got to year 3, we would have such an amount of money within our budget equalization reserve that it would be clear that we could afford to take less money every year from our residents than we have done previously. My plans were thwarted by COVID and the uncertainties that COVID have caused us over the previous 2 years. Now, whilst my plans were thwarted and there was no way in which I could prudently put this forward a year ago, in practice, as you'll see if you look at table 7 in your papers on page 98, it was abundantly clear that at the end of the day, we continue to have this, what I'm going to call over budgeting. And I need to be quite clear what I mean by over budgeting here. Our figures have been put together by officers in a consistent manner for many years, and they do so professionally and in accordance with the rules. I don't criticize that at all. The trouble is that the economic situation and the way in which local authorities are funded has radically changed over the years, to the extent now that from one year to the next, even at the moment from 1 month to the next, we don't know how much money we are going to get from central government. In the old days, we used to get a nice, simple, straightforward central grant, and we knew for the next year how much our central government money was. Now, it comes in fits and starts, it comes with relatively short notice, and it can be really, really difficult to budget a year in advance. And what we do, what our officers do, is to be prudent. They don't account for anything which they can't be certain of. And I welcome that. And I have said repeatedly to officers, and have continued to say, I wouldn't want that to be changed at this time. At some time in the future, we may wish to change that policy. And if we do so, we'll need to do it with our eyes open, being very aware of all of the risks, and to do so in an extremely transparent way. But we're not at that stage yet. Even at the moment, we don't know, we were about 6 weeks away, less than 6 weeks away from the end of the financial year. And we still don't know, possibly to the tune of hundreds of thousands, certainly tens of thousands, we don't know how much money we'll receive from central government for this year of 22-23, let alone next year. And here we are talking about the budget for next year. But what we can see, and table 7 shows it very clearly, is a pattern, very clear pattern. And no matter what our original position is that we start off with for our budget, we end up at the end of the year in a far better position than we were before. And one of the reasons for that is, as I've said before, the difficulty of being able to predict our income. A second reason is the amount of work which is put in by officers week in, week out, not just at budget time, but all the way through the year in trying to keep costs under control. We don't, in this authority, spend to budget. If it's not necessary to achieve our objectives by spending all of the money which is allocated to an area, we save the money, and so we should. That is actually good housekeeping. Now, in the overall scheme for next year, basically, when we look at the general fund budget, it's pretty much steady as she goes. Pretty much we're talking about the same sort of services which have been provided previously, continuing to be provided to the same level. The one significant change that has been, to be quite honest, is in the economic growth section, where we have devoted more resources to it last year than the year before, and we're going to devote even more resources to it next year than this year. And that is because that is our number one priority. It is to ensure that we get good economic growth right across Fenland in all the different sectors which exist. Because if we have good economic growth, if we have more jobs, if we have better employment, if we have better skills for people to be able to fill the jobs which are available, then everyone will benefit. Now, in next year's figures, there have been difficulties, there have been challenges, as well as opportunities. We've got greater energy costs in next year's budget than we've had previously and than we expected. We've got higher drainage board costs than we'd previously expected. Then we have other things balancing the equation the other way. For example, the additional efficiency savings, which we've already achieved and will achieve from that Transformation Agenda 1 I talked about previously. And also an increase, a significant increase in our NNDR income, which is an increase which, in my opinion, is going to increase quite significantly over the course of the medium-term financial strategy. And looking at the medium-term financial strategy, we see the usual pattern. And it's not just the usual pattern for this council, it's the usual pattern for councils across the country. But it shows a challenge between projected income and projected expenditure. And I think just about every council in the country has exactly the same profile, just as we have had in many years in the past. If we were to go back 5 years and we were to look at the projection for the current year, we'd see a very large challenge which had to be met. And these challenges are met year on year on year. And the reason we're able to do it as successfully as we do, is because we have a greater financial resilience, a greater financial strength than many other councils of our type around the country. And part of that, I have to say, is down to the inheritance of many years, if not decades, of prudent financial operations within this council. Now, looking at the medium-term financial strategy, one of the ways in which we are going to be facing these challenges is through our transformation agenda. Not merely changing our processes as a result of the process mapping which is going on so that we achieve the objectives we need to achieve more efficiently than we have done before, but looking much more fundamentally at the way in which this council operates. What is this council? What is this council physically? What is this council virtually? Just how will this council deliver the services which it has always delivered in the future? And that will be a challenge for the next administration, be a challenge after the election, and it's a challenge which potentially could produce a significant amount of improvement as far as this council is concerned if it's approached in the right way. We're not unique in that. Every council will be facing very similar challenges and opportunities, and many of them will come to similar conclusions to ours. And I just hope that whatever the results of the elections which are taking place in May, the new administration which takes over has a positive and ambitious attitude towards the need for change, and reasonably rapid change as far as that's concerned. But the strength that we've got in our accounts is such that we are in a position which is substantially better than I anticipated a year ago. If you remember a year ago, I stood up and defended, I was going to say, a deficit budget. There is no such thing as a deficit budget. Mark Saunders will tell me off if I don't say this. Every year we produce a balanced budget. By law, we've got to produce a balanced budget. Now, a balanced budget may mean you project you're going to take money from reserves, or you're going to put money into reserves, but you produce a balanced budget. So I'll get that legality out of the way first. So every year we have a balanced budget, but we know what we're talking about when we talk about a deficit budget or a surplus budget. And what we did last year was we put in for a deficit budget of £203,000, if you remember. And you'll remember that I said at the time, we need to do that because of the systemic over-budgeting that we have in this council. And lo and behold, what do we see in these papers? But in the current financial year, 2022-23, we are already currently projecting a £69,000 surplus, as opposed to that £203,000 deficit that originally we budgeted for. Massive difference between what we budgeted for and what we end up with. But what that represents is really important. And that's what the budget equalisation reserve is about. This represents the amounts of money that we have taken from our residents through council tax and we haven't spent. We took it from them because we budgeted for it, and then we didn't spend all of that money. And there is a moral issue here. And the moral issue is, should we take money from our residents if we don't need it in order to spend? And I think now the evidence, especially post-COVID, is that we don't need to take as much money from our residents in order to achieve the services that we want. But we've now got 1.06 million pounds worth of budget equalisation reserve of those monies, which we can always dip into if we need to at some stage in the future if something unexpected happens. In fact, that 1.06 million is going to be increased by that 69,000 from the current financial year. So it's more like 1.15 million, 1.13 million. So we are in a very strong position. And because we're in a strong position, we've got some choices we can make. Now, one choice we can make is to continue to tax as we do, or even tax more. And it's perfectly reasonable to have that position if you so wish. But if your position is that we primarily are there to look after the interests of our local residents, as long as we can manage to ensure that services are provided at a reasonable standard, as long as we can do that, it is quite immoral just for the sake of it to take more money from residents than we need to. Now, we could take more money from residents and then we could spend more. But I personally believe, and I think many people believe in this chamber, that the best people to spend residents' money are the residents themselves. And the more money that we can leave in residents' purses, pockets, and bank accounts, the better. And that's what we're in a fortunate position to be able to do at the moment. This is not just a one-off. We've got enough reserves in place as far as the budget equalisation reserve is concerned to maintain the current level of council tax, the proposed level of council tax for some time to come. It's not at all impossible with enough hard work that we'd even do more in the future, not impossible. That's not what's being proposed here. We're working on the assumption in the medium-term financial strategy that there would be a 2% reduction in the council tax for next year, and then it would stay the same for the following 4 years. That's the assumption which is being made in the medium-term financial strategy. If, through our hard work and through the work of officers and through what happens in the national political and financial situation, we are fortunate enough to be able to do more in the future, I'll welcome the opportunity. But we have to be prudent. And this proposal we have in front of us today for a 2% reduction is very prudent. It doesn't go into the reserves one little bit, and it doesn't take advantage of all those extra monies, all that 1.13 million pounds of monies that we've taken from residents over the last 4 years that we haven't used. So we've got a good cushion to be able to fall back on. Now, there are a whole host of other things within this report, including changes to council tax, making it more punitive for empty homes, making it punitive for second homes, a whole host of things. And if I were to keep on speaking, unfortunately, you'd all fall asleep. But I think what I'd like to do is to open up the opportunity, Chairman, if I may, for people to ask any questions if they wish. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Do I have a seconder for this? Councillor Booth. Thank you. Would you like to exercise your right to speak now or after the debate? Thank you. The item is now open for debate. Councillor Tierney.
Thank you, Chairman. Ever since I became a councillor, I have regularly been putting out surveys, asking people questions on policy, so that I can be sure that the things I'm representing broadly reflects what the voters want me to represent on them. And one of the questions I often ask is about council tax. And it will come as no surprise to you that people often express that council tax is too high. They would like to see it cut. Well, of course they do. Who doesn't want their bills cut? It's so common, though, that I hear this. I would say it's 95% of the responses, and only a very small section of the responses say, no, I'm quite happy with council tax going up. It's so common. And I've also seen a lot of people become councillors who became councillors saying exactly the same. I'm becoming a councillor because I want to make sure that we don't council tax people too much, that we have just enough to do the services, but that we don't overdo it. And yet within 6 months, too many seem to go native. They seem to suddenly accept the fact that council tax is going to go up by an eye-watering amount, as we've seen, for instance, county council. And I always think For the last 10 years plus, I've been saying that every group, and a lot of people here, including members of the opposition, will remember, but I've always argued for a council tax freeze, and I've often said, what about a cut? And everyone's laughed. But we shouldn't just presume that we're always going to rise people's bills. We should be looking at what we need and taking the amount we need and no more than that. Because as has been correctly said, this is not our money, it's residents' money. And never is it more highlighted than at times like this, when people are struggling to pay their bills, don't know how they're going to pay their electric or their mortgage or their rent or their food to get a dinner on the table. Never has it been more important than this. And so I'm actually excited and proud to be in this position, because we said 4 years ago, our aspiration was to freeze council tax, and we did it every single year. This isn't an election year special, because we've done it every year since we were elected. And this year, we're proposing a cut for the reasons that have already been stated quite reasonably. We're not going to cut services. We're delivering great services. We're doing good work. We could have a dispute about some issues, but I think broadly we all accept this is quite a successful council. And yet we're able to say to people, it's tough times. I know it's not a fortune. It's not loads of money. It's not going to make anyone wealthy, but it's a different direction to what we're seeing all over the country. Too many councils immediately saying, let's put up to the eye-watering maximum amount because we can, because it seems safer to us in some nebulous way. I think this is actually absolutely the right thing to do. And I know that people are going to support it, because of course they're going to support it. People's money is better in their own pockets, and they are better to choose how to spend it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Booth. Sorry, Councillor Tierney. Are there any other? Are there any other things? Councillor Booth, you'd like to reserve your right to sum up?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I mean, the point I was going to make is, I mean, the report makes the point that this is a political decision. And, you know, basically, as far as I see it, this is an election year, and this is why it's been suddenly brought forward. The reason I'm particularly sceptical is the fact we had OMS a couple of weeks ago, where we had a budget put to us that proposing 0%. Suddenly, within a couple of weeks, we're down to a -2%. Now, I don't disagree with this cut, because actually, residents of Fenland are paying over the odds as far as district council tax is concerned, compared to other district councils, because we've been ill-served by this government who haven't got the right funding formula for local government, and this area, which suffers deprivation, is not getting its fair share of government resources compared to other areas. So we're being poorly served by the government. So that's why the council tax is probably twice as high as it needs to be. I think it's often quoted Kingsley and West Norfolk Council have got probably half the council tax base that we have. Thank you, Councillor Sutton. I mean, I think it's Black Bear Lane is often quoted in Wisbech, that, you know, halfway down you've got a different level of council tax compared to us. And yes, we should not be overtaxing people, but it's because this government isn't supporting this area like it should. And I think another recent example is the failure to get the levelling up bid money, which again, I think people are viewing that as another election bribe by this Conservative government, which is shocking, really. But I do support in this reduction. I think we need to go forward. But the other issue that does need to be addressed is people have said that services are okay at this council. Well, I think we've had several instances today where services are suffering and people are quite sick of it. So often I'll get complaints about how long it takes for people to get through to the council on the phone. It's regularly at parish council meetings, it's a big issue. That is a service area where people who don't have access to the internet are suffering because we're not providing the right service. The street lighting, you know, particularly for parish councils, it's not a great service. That needs to be addressed. The recycling rate has fallen through the roof since the introduction of the brown bin tax. I think it's gone down about 11% since that's been introduced. But getting to the bottom of that is never easy, because it's always smoke and mirrors with the figures. But we need to look at the service level that we're providing to Fenland residents and make sure it is acceptable. But I will support this because I think it's going in the right direction, but we really do need to sharpen our pencil.
Thank you, Councillor Booth. Councillor Bowden, would you like to sum up?
Oh, thank you, Chairman. Well, it's been a very entertaining and interesting debate. And I'm grateful for the comments which have been made, particularly Councillor Booth's comments, which are very much appreciated. And one thing he mentioned at the very beginning, which I think is really important, is things aren't perfect. They certainly aren't perfect, and there's always room for improvement. The phone issue, for example, is one which is fundamental to the way in which we are contacted by our residents. And this again comes into the TA1 and TA2 strand that I was talking about before. And it will be particularly important that we ensure that in future we have the best possible means of listening to our residents and responding to their inquiries. And that doesn't just mean by phone, by a whole host of other means potentially as well. And we've got to remember that the changes which we will have to make in the next administration, whoever that may be led by and whoever may be the councillors then, but those changes quite probably are ones which will last for a generation. There are going to be some really fundamental questions which are raised, and there'll be some fundamental answers which will have to come out. And we have to be very alert to that, but exactly what Councillor Booth has just said, ultimately it's got to be about the service we provide to residents and how we respond to their needs. So fully accept those comments that were made by Councillor Booth, and I'm happy to commend this budget to the full council.
Thank you, Councillor Bowden. There are no further speakers, therefore detailed recommendations are set out on page 80 of the report. In accordance with the requirements of recorded votes, member services will now call upon each member of your names, and you must then indicate whether you are for or against or abstaining from voting on the recommendation proposed. Please unmute your microphone and respond and mute it again when you've finished. Member services, can I call upon you please to take the vote?
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Benny.
For.
Councillor Bly.
For.
Councillor Bowden.
For.
Councillor Booth.
For.
Councillor John Clark. Councillor Sam Clark.
For.
Councillor Connor.
For.
Councillor Cornwall.
For.
Councillor Count.
For.
Councillor Davis.
For.
Councillor Devine. Councillor Kim French.
For.
Councillor Hay.
For.
Councillor Hoy.
For.
Councillor Humphrey.
For.
Councillor Laws.
For.
Councillor Lynn.
For.
Councillor Marks. Councillor Mason.
For.
Councillor Meekins.
For.
Councillor Miscanlon.
Or
Councillor Mockett.
For.
Councillor Murphy.
For.
Councillor Patrick.
For.
Councillor Purser.
For.
Councillor Rackley.
For.
Councillor Seaton.
For.
Councillor Spalding.
For.
Councillor Sutton.
For.
Councillor Tierney.
For.
Councillor Walwork. Councillor Wicks. Councillor Hewlett. Thank you, Chairman. That's 33 members who have voted for.
thank you very much for that. The recommendation has been agreed. We now go on to agenda item 13, the council tax resolution. Item 13 relates to the council tax resolution for 23-24, and the report can be found on pages 149 to 152 of your agenda. Members again are reminded in relationship to this item, paragraph 15.4 of standing orders requires a recorded vote to be taken. I therefore call upon Councillor Bowden, portfolio holder for finance, to propose the report.
Thank you, Chairman. This will be really brief. This council tax resolution merely puts into force the change to council tax, which is the result of the budget changes we've just voted for. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bowden. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Booth. You wish to exercise your right to speak now or afterwards?
I move the motion, Chairman.
The item is open for debate should anyone wish to debate it. Councillor Sutton.
Thank you, Chairman. yeah, as I said, why wouldn't you welcome a cut, so long as it doesn't put the long-term viability of the council into jeopardy, as we've seen in other places. But it still leaves us a long way from the councils around us in terms of cost to residents. If you live in Kings Lynn and West Norfolk, as an example, Councillor Boo said in Black Bear Lane, if you live in Fenland or Cambridgeshire, you'll pay £111.37 more than you do if you live in Norfolk. East Cambs, you'll pay £113.14 more. South Cambs, £89.93 more. Huntingdonshire, £99.38 more. Cambridge City, £36.39 more. South Holland, £59.85 more. So whilst we welcome the reduction, there's still a long way to go. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor. Right. And then what? Councillor Hoy.
Yeah, I wasn't going to speak, but I will, because just a couple of things I wanted to say. I do agree, obviously it is a lot of money. When I moved into my house 6 years ago, I was paying £63 a month for my council tax. Now I know that sounds really cheap. I do get 25% off a single person discount because obviously I live on my own. And I'm not saying this to moan, because I know obviously a lot of you probably pay a lot more if you've got a bigger house. I know that's, you know, you're probably thinking, well, you know, worries me. So it's not a sob story. But the point I wanted to make is that's now increased to £88 a month over the last sort of 5 years. So it is going up. I'm sure it's going to now, when we get the next bill, probably be 95, nearly £100. And I am the lowest band possible, getting a single person discount. And I'm not like saying, I'm not sort of crying poverty here, but there are going to be people that are in a more difficult situation that are going to have to try and find this. £25 a week that's going to equate to is not an insignificant amount of money. I was really glad to hear Councillor Booth speak up in favour of low council tax. Please, can you, when you have your Liberal Democrat meetings, you must have like national or local meetings, please, can you impart that wisdom to your fellow Liberal Democrats, because we've had 5% of county council, it's going to be probably £82 a year on the council tax. Deputy Mayor of CPCA, Lucy Netzinger, voted through a brand new council tax that we've never had before to pay for some buses that we don't even see in this area again. So when people get their bills this year, there's going to be a massive whack on it. And Councillor Sutton, when you were deputy leader here of this council, the council tax increased every year. Mark Saunders helpfully produced a little chart for me. I think it was last year. I've sadly lost that chart, which I'm devastated about, but I'm sure I can have another one of it. But it was, you saw the 4 years prior to 2019, it went up every year by 2%. So I think people need to perhaps have a longer memory.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Sutton.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll just respond to Councillor Hoy there. I'll just see whether she can stretch her memory back to the selection committee meeting in the castle, where I stood in front of you for the Wisbech St Mary ward, and I suggested that we go to the electorate with a 0%. But no doubt you'll be forgotten.
Do it though, who was in charge? Councillor Cornwall.
Yeah, Chairman, this is in no way political. But no, it isn't going to cut the brown bin. Right, but can I just go back? Right. Our council tax rates for this authority, as you heard earlier, contain 1.9 million for our drainage levies. Now, large parts of the country, they don't have that. So they get the advantage of something that we don't. I had a quick look, actually. We are 1.9, I think the three Lincolnshire South authorities, something like 3.4, and I think over the border in Norfolk it's 2.8 or something like that. These are incredible figures. And, you know, it really is time that we looked at this ourselves and said to our drainage boards, we are capping you. You can do what you like, but we are only going to pay so much. And if you want to go away and fight with government, you do so, because we've had enough of you. It has reached ridiculous proportions, to be quite frank. We are picking this up that no one else did. We used to get help from the government, I believe, to pay for that. That's long since gone. You know, we have to fund that up ourselves through our council tax. And it's absolutely ridiculous. And it really is time that everybody join together and put some blooming pressure on government to get this sorted out once and for all, because it's just become ridiculous.
Councillor Count.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to open the conversation with actually paying tribute to the leader, Chris Bowden, and the officers and the cabinet and all the members that have managed to put this budget together. To deliver a council tax freeze for a number of years, it's coming with a reduction of 2%, is actually a phenomenal achievement. We know it's tough to do that because look at nationally, and I'm not aware of any yet that have gone for a reduction. There might be one out there, there might be two, but one way or another, the vast majority of councils nationally have had put their tax, have decided to put their council tax up. So a fair tribute where it's due to the people that are responsible for driving this change forward. That means we can deliver a tax reduction to our residents. I think it's slightly difficult to explain easily that it's not simply a matter of a person in street A in a different borough pays less or more than us in our Finland. We heard a very rational explanation earlier on that government funding is primarily one of the main sources of funding, which is to blame. We fought in Cambridgeshire for many years for a fairer funding formula, but that is not a Conservative issue. That is an issue that's gone on with successive governments for decades. The formula is broken, was broken 20, 30 years ago. It's acknowledged as broken. Cambridgeshire has lost out on it, and we're waiting for the new fair funding review. What I believe that we would have had that by now, was it not for the coronavirus and the impacts of that. It was in the pipeline, it was going to be delivered, but the world changed. Now, when that comes along, I expect us all to get a fairer slice of cake, and that will change the amount that we can charge our residents. But it's not okay just to say that we charge more than a resident in a different area, unless you understand all the facts and figures that go behind it. We've just heard a very good rationale from Councillor Cornwall about the drainage board levies that are imposed on us here that other people don't have. South Cambs, as far as I'm aware, do not operate any leisure centres with swimming pools, heated swimming pools, which is a significant burden on anybody's financial things. So it's not comparing like, it's comparing apples with pears. So it's not really a direct comparison. So it shouldn't be made. I think we should be proud of the direction we're taking and the point that we've arrived at. I would have some concerns about capping the drainage boards. Let's be honest, we heard a lot about flooding earlier on. We live in Finland. The only reason that we're all dry in our houses is because the work's done in our ditches and our dikes, keeping them clear and keeping them running. Now, I'm not going to say that the council taxpayer here should be paying for all that, and I totally support going to government and making a repeated case. This is on our residents, but I can't be in favour of something that puts at risk all our houses where we live. So that particular element I can't go for, but I would support addressing government and trying again to get some of this unfairness taken out of the system. But thank you for your time, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Count. Are there no further questions? If not, Councillor Booth, would you like to exercise your right to?
Yeah, just briefly, Chairman. I mean, just addressing the point about the drainage boards, we don't have the power to cap it, so you know, that is not an option for us. It does need government change. And the issue with drainage boards is actually we're getting the water down from the rest of the country that comes through our area. So why do our residents have to pay for all the drainage precepts? So yeah, it does need a government approach. Unfortunately, it's not something the government's interested in. We saw that when we had the issue of red diesel on the drainage boards. We're going to have to start paying for it only at the last minute with a lot of pressure from people like Ada and the drainage boards. Was that exemption actually reversed? So it's not a top priority, which it should be, given what's happening around the country. That's it, Chairman.
Councillor Bowden, would you like to sum up?
Thanks, Chairman. This has been surprising to me because I don't think that there's much which anyone has said that I disagree with. In fact, I wholeheartedly applaud some of the comments which have been made, even if some of them have been slightly factually inaccurate. Councillor Sutton's comments in particular, I was very, very pleased with. it is very difficult to compare one authority with another. Councillor Camp gave some reasons for that. Additionally, if you just look at the headline figure, one of the difficulties that we do have also is that our council tax base, our number of A and B properties is unusually large compared with another authority next door, East Lynn and West Norfolk. So it's sometimes quite difficult to make the necessary adjustments so that you are comparing like with like. But I agree with Councillor Sutton. I think still our cost base is too high. And we, in the medium to long term, when we are looking at these two transformation agendas that we're talking about, especially transformation agenda 2, we have to look at that and we have to react to it. And the challenge that Councillor Sutton just raised, if not the offer of help, is something that I wholeheartedly welcome. And so if that's a direction of travel that Councillor Sutton wants, and Councillor Sutton is re-elected, and if I'm lucky enough to be re-elected as well, we'll actually be singing from the same hymn sheet as far as that's concerned. Some very interesting comments from Councillor Cornwall about the drainage levies. Yes, figure of 1.9 million, but I don't know how many of you realise that represents 25% of the council tax that we get in. So a quarter of the council tax we get in goes out in those drainage levies, which we have no control over whatsoever. But we're not the worst affected. If you go to South Holland, it's more than 50%. And Councillor Cornwall again mentioned there are three, in fact, not more than three, but there are three authorities in particular in Lincolnshire which suffer badly as far as that's concerned. But the number of local authorities around the country which have a significant problem when it comes to drainage levies is relatively small. You're talking about 20, 25 authorities at most which have any significant problem. So it's not received the attention which it deserves, despite the amount of pressure that we've put on to our MPs and to government until now. Because Michael Gove produces, or the Secretary of State produces each year a settlement letter, which is sent out to all local authorities. First of all, telling them what money they're going to get, other than the money that we're not told about yet and won't find out about until next year, but also just giving a basic resume of where we are and what's changing. And lo and behold, last couple of paragraphs of the letter that he sent out only a week or so ago said that government is aware that there is an unfairness to some local authorities in the increases in drainage levies which have been imposed upon them. And government is looking to address that issue before the end of March this year. Now, you tell me what that means, because I don't know, but I'm hopeful that that means that we're going to be getting some money in this financial year in relation to the monies that are spent on the drainage boards. And yes, Councillor Booth's entirely correct. We can't cap the drainage boards, but the drainage boards and the way in which they account for their expenditure, they're massively old-fashioned. They have sinking funds for their capital expenditure rather than, I was going to say the modern method, rather than the late 20th century method, which is to borrow for your capital expenditure against the periods which are going to benefit from the expenditure of their capital expenditure. And I believe there are some significant changes which can be made as far as the drainage boards are concerned, which we are in a strong position to influence because of the number of members of local authorities who are members of each drainage board. And again, this is something for the next administration to consider, but if there can be cross-party agreement within this chamber about that in the future, whoever's in charge, there are things which we can do. So I wouldn't be quite so blasé as to say we can't do anything at all about it. I think it's in fact important we do something about it in future. But the news from Michael Gove is exceptionally good, exceptionally surprising, hasn't had much publicity yet. We don't know what's involved. We may end up getting tuppence, or we may end up getting a six-figure sum. We just don't know. And none of that, of course, has been included in these figures because it's come out. It's only become public in the last 7 days, and we don't even know what the number is. And that's for this year, for the calendar year, for the financial year 22-23. So coming back to the subject, I think everyone is actually in agreement with the proposal which we have in front of us, and I commend it to the chamber.
Thank you, Councillor Bowden. Right. There are no further speakers, and therefore, following the revenue budget for 23-24 now having been set, the council is required to pass a resolution to set out pages 149 to 152 of the agenda in order to set the council tax requirements with effect from the 1st of April 2023. I will now ask member services, colleagues to ask members in turn to vote. Member services.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Benny,
For.
Councillor Bly,
For.
Councillor Bowden,
For.
Councillor Booth, Councillor John Clark, Councillor Sam Clark, Councillor Connor,
For.
Councillor Cornwall,
For.
Councillor Count,
For.
Councillor Davis, Councillor Devine, Councillor Kim French, Councillor Hay, Councillor Hoy, Councillor Humphrey, Councillor Laws, Councillor Lynn, Councillor Mason,
For.
Councillor Meekins, Councillor Miss Scanlon,
For.
Councillor Mockett,
For.
Councillor Murphy, Councillor Patrick, Councillor Purser, Councillor Seaton, Councillor Spalding,
For.
Councillor Sutton, Councillor Tierney, Councillor Walwork, Councillor Wicks. That's 30 members in attendance have voted for.
Thank you, member services. That's unanimous. We now go on to agenda item 14, the approval of the Anglia Revenue Partnership, ARP, entering into section 113 agreement with Broadlands District Council and South Norfolk Council for the provision of fraud services. Agenda item 14 can be found on pages 153 to 156 of the agenda pack, and recommended for approval for the Anglian Revenue Partnership to enter into an S113 agreement for the provision of a fraud services in Broadland District Council and South Norfolk Council. I call upon Councillor Bowden to propose the report.
Thank you, Chairman. In the absence of Councillor French, this is just what it says it is. There's a legal obligation for full council to give its approval to any agreement such as this, where we're creating a partnership which deals with financial matters such as this. And the financial matters are very clear. They are to provide a fraud service. And by doing this together with Broadland District Council and South Norfolk Council, we just increase the economies of scale which are involved in the process. There's a lot of expertise which is involved in anti-fraud work, and no one council of any of the sort of size that we are, no one council can really afford that expertise. By different councils joining together, you get the opportunity to get that expertise, to get the economies of scale in processing the necessary work which is done on fraud, and to get the best results for each individual council, ourselves included. Thank you, Chair.
We have a seconder. Councillor Laws. Thank you. Councillor Laws, do you wish to exercise your right to speak or wait for the summing up period?
Thank you, Chair. I'll wait for the summing up.
Thank you. Right, it's now open for debate. Councillor Laws, do you wish to?
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Bowden, do you wish to sum up? Sorry. With Broadlands and South Norfolk District Councils for the provision of fraud services, is this agreed? Thank you, that is agreed. We now go on to agenda item 15 to approval for the Anglian Revenue Partnership enter into a section 113 agreement with Lincolnshire County Council to include Boston Borough Council, the City of Lincoln, East Lindsey Council, District Council, West Lindsey District Council, South Kesteven District Council, North Kesteven District Council, and South Holland District Council for ARP to provide a single person discount fraud service. The report is to be found on page 157 to 160 of the agenda pack. Similarly, the last item concerns the provision of fraud services with Lincolnshire County Council in association with City, District and Borough Council set out in the report. Is this agreed? No.
on 15. Yeah. Councillor Bowden, would you like to read the report for this?
Are we back on?
We're back on it. I turned the page over.
I thought you were
Yeah.
remarkably quick. then.
Yeah,
I was
we were going quicker than that.
I was tempted, to be quite honest, Chairman, just to say ditto, because the same arguments that were used in the previous agenda item apply in this one. In this case, though, we're talking about the single person discount and single person discount fraud. And many of you will be aware that single person discount fraud is the biggest fraud which exists in local government. It's the greatest amount of money that we lose to fraud is because of people claiming a single discount when they're not entitled to. There are lots of ways of this fraud being investigated and being detected. But again, the more individuals, the more councils that you have involved in the organization which does it, the more economies of scale you have, the more automation you have of it, and the better the results are. There's still a large amount of fraud going on so far as single person fraud is concerned. This will help reduce that. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Bowden. The item is open for debate. Should anyone, do I have a seconder for this motion? Councillor Hoy. It's now open for debate. Does anyone wish to debate? Councillor Booth.
Move that motion be put, chairs, we've already voted.
True. That was my error. But we will ask, does Councillor Hoy wish to say anything? No. Does Councillor Bowden wish to sum up, or are you quite happy with what's taken place so far? Right. So in that case, we'll take a vote on approving it. Agreed. Thank you very much. The recommendations, we now go on to agenda item 16, political proportionality. The report is to be found on pages 161 to 180 of the agenda. I call upon Councillor Bowden as leader and portfolio holder for finance to present the report.
Thank you, Chairman. And this has been done with the assistance of Amy Brown. It's always necessary to look at political proportionality, but with us being just a couple of months away from the elections and the completely new council, which will convene in May, I had some communication with Councillor Cornwall, and I put to him 3 different options. I think they were so lengthy probably that he just decided to go for the easiest one of the 3, which was to have the status quo and just to leave things as they are until the elections take place. There are other options which are open to us, but what is the point of us going to the level of increasing or decreasing the number of councillors in various committees in order to achieve exactly political proportionality?
Councillor, do I have a seconder?
Yes, I'll second it, Chairman.
Thank you. The item is now open for debate. Should anyone wish to debate it? No. Councillor Cornwall, do you wish to make a statement?
I thought it was stupid making any other decision. It saves everybody a load of work and faff, to be quite honest, if that is such a word. So I'm quite happy with it, and so is my group.
Councillor Bowden, do you wish to sum up? Thank you. Thank you, members. Yeah, leave less bit spare. Thank you, members. The recommendations on page 161 of the full council, and note the reserve political proportionality for Fenton District Council and approve the proposal of the allocation committees and panels to the outside bodies is set out in Appendix A and B and continue to remainder of 22-23 for the municipal year. Is this agreed? Thank you. We now go on to agenda item 17, the senior management pay policy statement. This report can be found on page 181 to 192 of the agenda. And I call upon Councillor Bowden as leader and portfolio holder for finance to report.
We are required by law for this paper to be brought before council, in fact, before every council every year. but it's not as exciting as it seems. We can't vote it down. You can't decide you don't like the amount of pay being paid to senior management, and therefore you'll vote it down. In fact, I've no idea what the implications would be if we voted against this. It really is a rather pointless paper to be brought before us, but it's a legal requirement, and I think we'll avoid any complications and difficulties by just voting in favour of it. It is the most pointless paper to be produced each year, but by law we have to have it.
Councillor Bowden, do I have a seconder? Councillor Count. Thank you very much. It's now open for debate. Councillor Booth.
Thank you, Chairman. I mean, I think the whole point of this is to try and stop wage escalation for senior management within local councils. I think it was Eric Pickles actually introduced this some time ago. I don't necessarily disagree with what Councillor Bowden is saying. I think one of the principles that I have been against is where chief executive senior officers get paid more than the Prime Minister, but given the current incumbent of number 10, they probably actually deserve the money they're getting over what he gets. So I'll move the motion, Chair.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Booth. Are there any more speakers? No. Councillor Count, you wish to?
Nothing to add, Chair. Thank you.
Councillor Bowden, do you wish to sum up? Thank you. Thank you, members. The recommendation is on page 181 of the full council papers to adopt the senior management pay policy statement for 22-23. Is this agreed? Right, ladies and gentlemen, that concludes this afternoon's meeting. I would like to thank you for your attendance and confirm that the next meeting will take place at the annual meeting on the 4 o'clock on the 22nd of May. And I'd like to make a statement myself. I've sat in this chair now for 3 years and I've thoroughly enjoyed it. I've met some very nice people and I've met some people that I don't wish to meet again, but I thank you all for your support of me in this position. So, thank you very much. And whoever the next incumbent of this chair is, he may be on my right, we don't know, but thank you very much for all your support. And especially thanks to Rob Spalding. Through ill health, he wasn't able to complete his term of office with me. So thank you, Rob. That concludes today's meeting at 6:28.